All right, we are back for another episode of the Dynasty Drive, and I'm joined tonight by Jakob Sanderson. Jakob does good work with Fantasy Intervention, RotoUnderworld, one of the co-hosts of the Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast. So, Jakob, I appreciate you taking some time after you finish up with college exams and talk running backs, baby. We're running the damn ball.
Absolutely. I'm always happy to talk about running backs. I draft them early. I draft them often. They're fully incorporated into my brand. So this is my bread and butter here. I'm excited to talk about some backs, especially this really brutal 2021 class of running backs.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Like it's a weird draft class, and we'll get to it in a second, but since it's draft week, obviously, so we'll talk about those guys. But before we get into some of that, looking back at last year's draft class, now a year removed from, we were just talking about privately before we went live, the Clyde Edwards-Helaire hype kind of going wild after the landing spot got found out. Looking back at last year's draft class, how did you have those guys ranked coming into the season? And has anything really changed substantially for you heading into this year from a year ago?
Yeah, so I think like the two biggest changes is Clyde's gone down. So I'll own up to it. I was a sucker. I had Clyde as my 101 preseason, not pre-draft, but preseason. I really liked Clyde pre-draft. This wasn't the scenario where he was like my RB6 or my RB7 and he vaulted up the board. He was my third favorite in the class going into the draft. I really, really value pass catching at running back. And Clyde was an outstanding pass catcher at LSU and still I think is at Kansas City. He bumped up to the one spot. Wasn't a good move for me. He's now, of those guys, I think I'd probably put him sixth, actually. And that's not because I think he's dust. I actually think Clyde's a massive buy this year, and we'll talk about that. But right now, I'd have Taylor in the one chair. He's been my RB1 overall. I set him in that position first when Marlon Mack tore his Achilles. Got a little bit hairy for a while. But, I mean, I got to support my guy. I'm a Colts fan. I love Jonathan Taylor. I hope to see him running the damn ball for 5, 6, 7 years in a Colts uniform. So he's my one. Swift is one of my favorite prospects. It's come out the last while. Like I said, I really love pass catching at running back, and especially with a guy like Swift, he's got that prototypical workhorse size as well, plus the pass catching, plus the athleticism. To me, he's a total package. I have him as my RB4 overall in Dynasty, and he's my second guy. Then I go Akers, Dobbins, Gibson, Clyde, and all six of those guys are in my top 12 overall. And Robinson, I guess, would be the seventh for me. I don't know. I mean, he had a fantastic season last year, and I certainly wouldn't want to take anything away from that. I thought he was really great at Illinois State, and he was someone that I remember our first podcast that I recorded, the Full Tilt Show with Tom and Billy last year. I remember it was like a hot take. But I was saying I like James Robinson more than Reichwell Armstead and Divine Zigbo. And so at that point, I guess I was a James Robinson truther. And at this point, I guess I'm a James Robinson hater. Just because to me, he's a really good plotting back, but he still is that kind of not elite athleticism, not an extra special guy in the pass game. To me, he's like the best possible version of like that David Montgomery archetype. And to me, that's just doesn't quite have the same long-standing ceiling as the others. But
I think that's a good point at how you tied in Montgomery there, because Robinson, similar to Montgomery, is a guy that I look at my rankings and I think, man, he should be higher based on last year, but I just can't do it. Like, I don't know where you have Robinson overall. I'm looking now. I have him as my running back 21. And it's not that I don't like him. I like him just fine, but it's kind of that combination of, like you said, plotting runner. And I worry that I always am a little worried when it's a running back without the draft capital investment. Mm-hmm. Like, it just feels like, especially a team with assets to go whichever direction they want in the draft. And I don't think, they'll make a play for Najee Harris or Travis Etienne or anything like that. They could, but I don't know. It's hard for me to be committed to him or have him ranked as, a back end RB1 or even a high end RB2.
Because who knows, right? Like I mean, speaking from Cole's perspective, like I thought Marlon Mack was a really good running back.
Sure.
Maybe he's not anything anymore because of the Achilles, but of course this time last year we didn't know he was going to go and tear his Achilles the first week of the season. And I thought he was a really good running back. And they felt, they wanted to go get Jonathan Taylor. So would it shock me if James Robinson got replaced? Absolutely not. And it wouldn't shock me if someone from that mid-range of running backs comes in and makes it closer to an even split, because he didn't compete with anyone last year. I mean, anyone. Like Raquel Armstead, bless his heart. I'm still concerned for his health. I honestly hope he's okay, right? Like, I think he had a very serious bout with COVID.
Sure.
Divina Zigpo is like, I don't know, like, he's not good. Chris Thompson, super washed. And that was all. That was all they had. So, what is there with James Robinson? Like, we don't know for sure if he can hold off a legitimate challenger. And that's, I just looked up my rankings while you're talking. You have him 21. I have him 22. So pretty much similar range. I have him right ahead of Montgomery, who I believe I have at RB 24.
I have him right by it too. Montgomery, I have RB 19. So it's right in that same range.
Yeah, that's like I don't know. I have a type at running back, and it's usually folks that catch passes and or have high-end burst and speed. And with Robinson, he's got adequate burst. He's a no on the speed column, and he's, he looked good as a pass catcher last year, but they didn't have any options to throw to out of the running back position. Nothing from his college production would dictate to me that he is, a difference-making pass catcher. I don't think he was a difference-making pass catcher last year. So that's where I'm a little bit lower on James Robinson.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I think he was a pass catcher because he needed to be a pass catcher last year. They didn't have a better option to be a pass catcher. And I think regardless of what kind of investment kind of inevitably gets made at running back for the Jaguars, he probably loses some of that, pass catching market share in that backfield. But in terms of guys this year, draft's only a couple days away. Who are your guys, man? Who are your top 5 right now heading into the draft class? We'll compare notes.
Okay, sounds good. So I actually I have a clear-cut top 3. It's the same top 3, I think, as everyone else that isn't nuts. Travis Etienne is my number 1. That's probably a little bit off the cuff. I think most people probably have Najee Harris there. Like I said, I value that athleticism, and I value the pass catching running back. I haven't found that athleticism in my work necessarily correlates a ton to hit rate, but amongst those who do hit top 24 seasons, especially those that end up presenting as those top 12 backs, the folks that continue to be top 12 backs year over year over year tend to have plus size and plus burst, and they tend to have a history of pass catching contributions going back to the college level. So when I get a guy like Travis Etienne who comes in just under 80th percentile speed, just under 65th percentile burst, which those are kind of where I look for at my RB1 level, and he has a really strong pass catching track record, and he has the proper size, I just can't pass that up. Especially when I look at a guy like Javonte Williams, who I really enjoy. I think he's a fantastic running back. I think especially he's the only 21-year-old of those top 3, and that's appealing to me in terms of when his production was. But I just don't see top 5 running back style upside with him. I think he's more of that Chris Carson, James Robinson, David Montgomery type of guy. I think the high end is maybe you look at a guy like a Melvin Gordon, who sort of became that pass catching running back, into his career. But I still don't foresee a ton of big plays in Javonte's. And then Najee Harris, who's my RB3, to me, there's just too many question marks. Like, I love his tape, but I struggle to rank someone in RB1, at least in my process, purely based off of tape while playing at Alabama as a 22-year-old. Right? He's going to be 23 coming in the NFL. That's quite old for running back prospect. And it doesn't concern me as much from a longevity perspective, because these guys are kind of one contract players to me anyways. But it matters to me in terms of how can I accurately judge his skill level when he looks like a man among boys, because he literally is a man among boys. Like, he's the only dude on the field that can order a beer after the game. So that's a concern to me, and that's why he's 3, even though I think on tape, he might look like the best in the class. That's my top 3. I round out my 5 with Chuba at 4 and Kenny Gainwell at 5, and I don't feel great about either. I think there's like 6 or 7 guys that I could make RB4, RB5, especially with, draft capital about to come in and landing spots. But I think after those 3, like, there's no one I would be particularly comfortable placing a bet on being a top 12 running back at any time soon. Where do you stand?
It's a weird group. It really is. It's the top three, and I forget who I was talking about this with recently, but it's the top three, and then I feel like it's stack them however you like them. Like whatever
Right.
your type is, it's kind of a mess after that. I have Najee Harris number one.
Yeah.
But it's funny you say, a man amongst boys. A good friend of mine, Peter Trainer, who's been on the show frequently, texted me today and said, I just realized Najee Harris is like a grandfather in running back years. And I got a good chuckle out of it.
He's a year older than Cam Akers and CH, or more than a year older than them right now.
It's so like, it really surprised me that he didn't declare last year. And it just kind of felt like, well, I feel good about being RB1 next year. You know what I mean? Right. not in last year's class.
Fair point.
But I have Najee Harris 1, ETN 2. Agreed. I'd love ETN, and it's close. Like, I hate to use the cop out of like, 1A, 1B, but it's really close for me between those two guys. I love Travis Etienne's upside athletically. I think he showed the development that I wanted to see as a pass catcher the last year at Clemson. I think he can be a weapon in the run game and the pass game pretty instantly early on in his pro career. And then again, I have Javonte 3. I think you might be the only guy that has Chuba Hubbard higher than me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm not even like pro Chuba. I came into this draft season expecting to be an anti-Chuba person, and he started as my RB7, and he's moved up by default. He's like dragged me to RB4 because all of these other jabronis just fail. They fail in front of my eyes. It's like, Jamar Jefferson, I want to like you. Oh, it turns out you're smaller than I expected, slower than I expected.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, man. You're done.
Pete had to hop in and let us know that Najee is ancient.
Who else though I'm thinking of? Elijah Mitchell can't make up his mind. Right at the Senior Bowl, he's 215. Then he comes out, he runs a 4.4. I'm like 4.4, 215. Here we go. Oh, now he's 201. Michael Carter, turns out he's small and slow. Trey Sermon's slow. Kylan Hill's slow. So I'm looking at all these guys. I'm like, well, I guess Chuba was good last year, and maybe if I just apply some amnesia, then I can feel good about him at RB4.
It's really weird for him. So after the top three, I have Kenny Gainwell 4 and Chuba Hubbard 5. But I like watching Chuba in 2019 versus 2020. It's like two totally different players. Like, it's so weird because 2020 was obviously forgettable. Like, there's really nothing good to say about it. Like, you almost have to just throw it out if you are, buying into him as a player. But 2019, when I went back and watched some of that, a couple months ago, or even a couple weeks ago, I was like, obviously, the speed, the long runs, all that good stuff. He ran for 2,000 yards and scored 20 rushing touchdowns, whatever. But so many positive things that you see in 2019, you didn't see at all in 2020. Like, oh, wow, look at these runs where he's showing off great vision running on the inside, like perfectly identifying the right hole and following his blocks. And it's like he was a totally different player in 2020. So I'm still in on him in the top 5, but it is kind of a product of everybody else behind him. I hate like the cop out of its landing spot dependent, but if a team invests, early day 2 capital in somebody like Trey Sermon, like, okay, he probably comes up a little bit on my board just because of the investment. But yeah, it's a bit of a mess. Outside of those top 5 guys, it's like, well, do you want big and slow or small and slow? Like, it's kind
just,
of what they
no
all
one
are.
has the full picture, right? It's like, and that's with Chuba, the only reason why he's still RB4 for me. And I should clarify, in my overall rookie rankings in Superflex, like, I have the top 3 ranked 6, 8, 9, and then I don't have another running back until 21, which is Chuba. So between 10 and 20, it's Mac Jones and 10 receivers. That's sort of how I feel about this running back class.
It's about right.
The only reason I'm there with Chuba is if I just look at all of these guys in this second tier, right? You mentioned Gainwell, Michael Carter, Kylan Hill, Jamar Jefferson, Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon. If there's someone I'm missing, my apologies. But I'm just trying to think, like, can I picture this guy being an RB1? And I don't mean a Mike Davis RB1, where you look at the end of the season, it's like, oh, this guy is an RB1. No, like, get that out of here. Like, a guy that you go into your startup draft one day and you're like, I actually really want to draft this guy. And you're drafting him in the top 12 running back picks. And to me, like, Kenny Gainwell, no chance. He's too small. Michael Carter, no chance. He's too small and he's too slow. all these other guys, plotters. Whereas Chuba, at least he's theoretically fast. He didn't actually run fast in the 40. Supposedly he's an Olympian.
I don't understand.
And yet he ran like 4.53, so I don't really know what to do with that. But
I don't understand how everybody else ran 4.3 at their pro day except Chuba.
Yeah, so
every other pro day.
Theoretically, he's fast, and his size is not actually that good. Like, he's too tall for his weight, right? Like, if he was like 5'9", 210, I like 5'9", 210. I don't like 6'1", 210. That's too upright and usually easy to tackle, which coalesces with what I actually see on film. It's very Kenyon Drake, Tevin Coleman to me. But we've seen those guys look good. So I think if Chuba's in a scheme with a really good offensive line and where, it's a zone scheme where all he has to do is just run in one direction, make one cut, not put a lot of thought into it, and he just gets to be a one-cut runner with a great offensive line, I think he's going to break some big plays. And he's a better runner from a power perspective. He's more elusive. He's much better at everything in the open field. Mm-hmm. Like, once he's behind the line, he just doesn't process well, in my opinion. Like, I think he starts getting in his head. He doesn't see things quickly. He doesn't see things open up that quickly. He's very easy to bring down, I think, behind the line of scrimmage, and he's not very good in the receiving game in that way. But once he gets out moving, he seems to process a lot better. So I'm on board with Chuba in the right landing spot, but he's a guy, like, if you put him on like the Jets or whatever, forget it.
Yeah. I honestly, for Chuba's fantasy sake, I'm hoping he ends up on like Atlanta. Like, I would love Atlanta as a landing spot. Yeah. Like, I'm smash drafting him in the second round of rookie drafts if he goes. Absolutely. Like, I love that for him so much, but it's weird because I can kind of see him having a pretty decent fall in the draft. Like, I don't know that it's a lock he goes. Like, I don't feel confident he's going second round at all. And I think there's a chance he falls out of day 2 entirely.
To me, the only guy who could get drafted second round, other than the ones who are actually good, is Trey Sermon, because he's just like the kind of running back that NFL people like more than they should.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's weird. And I guess after we've kind of just crapped all over this running back group for this year, we've kind of answered already. This year's class of running backs, it doesn't even compare to last year. Last year was so exciting, so across the board. Is there anybody this year, like, Etienne's your top guy? Where does he rank comparatively to prospects coming into the draft last year with those guys?
Man, it's tough. Like, so coming into the draft, I guess higher, because obviously as a prospect, I didn't have Antonio Gibson or James Robinson anywhere near where they'd be ranked now. Purely as a prospect, to me, he's definitely behind Taylor, Swift, Akers, Dobbins. And again, I had higher last year. If I sort of went through the process that I go through this year, it's a lot more refined. Clyde would have been 5 for me last year. And I think Etienne would have been above him. So I guess 5. But to me, nobody in this class, not Harris or Etienne, or certainly not Williams, are above Swift, Taylor, Dobbins, Akers. I mean, there you have 4 dudes who basically hit all of the marks, right? Like, they're all the proper bell cow size.
Yeah.
They all were early declares. They all have plus athleticism, ranging from adequate to plus.
Yeah.
And all of them had sufficient target share. So pretty much everything you want in a running back prospect are those 4. I mean, you got the juice, you've got the skills, and they have the draft capital, which essentially, like, the draft capital to me is like an approximation of film, right?
Sure.
So all of those guys, like, pretty much from the second they were drafted last year, like, the one drum I've been banging is just whatever you do, get as many of those 2020 backs as you can, because so often in Dynasty, we're always deciding between, do we want running backs because they're going to produce the most right now, or do we want wide receivers or quarterbacks, super flex, because of the shelf life? And to me, those 2020 backs, like, this is your one chance to get workhorse backs with juice, with pass catching upside, and that are all only 21 or 22. So you get to keep them for the entirety of the rookie contract, and you just don't even have to worry about running back if you can get 2 or 3 of those guys. And Yeah, to me, I've seen some people that say Harris would be like the RB1 or the RB2 compared to last year's class. I think that is absolutely ridiculous. So if I have the 103 in a Superflex draft or the 101 in a 1 QB draft, and I could even get Gibson or Akers or Dobbins for Harris, I would do that. 100% I would do that.
Yeah, it's tough for any of them to rank, especially over guys like Taylor. I mean, Taylor was special and kind of overthought a little bit. Like I remember, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I remember looking at it last year when everybody was freaking out about how many times he fumbled the ball in college. And it was like he had whatever
and it was like 7 million carries.
Yeah, it was an astronomical number. Like you look at it and it's a total drop in the bucket. It was so ridiculous that anybody got wound up over it. But moving on from rookies this year, guys that were drafted last year, and it could be a guy that was drafted last year, but a back who's already in the league that you're expecting to take that step, whether it was from last year as a rookie or a guy who's already been in for 2 or 3 years, somebody that you're expecting, I guess, sort of that pseudo breakout from this year to kind of vault himself into fantasy stardom, hopefully.
Yeah, so I'm famously picky with running backs. I don't own the old running backs really at all. It scares me too much from a value perspective. And I'm picky in terms of the attributes they have to have. So there's not a whole lot of running backs that I willingly invite on my team, especially, the ones that have been in there for a few years. But the one dude who I'm actively targeting this year, who I think some folks are down on, is Miles Sanders. He's when I did my article, my first article, Player Profiler, I looked at guys that are being drafted as RB1s already in Dynasty, and how many of those people actually become, or how many of those running backs actually become RB1s in the future, and how many do it multiple times. And specifically, I was looking at your speed score, your burst score, so size-adjusted athleticism, and your pass catching. And Miles Sanders is the only guy on my whole pool over the last, I think it was 7 or 8 years we went back, that hits those thresholds, that was once drafted as an RB1 in Dynasty and hasn't yet hit that RB1 mark. I think there's no reason really going into this year why we shouldn't feel as good about Sanders as we felt last year, right? Last year, he was being drafted as a borderline first round, second round pick in Dynasty prior to the start of the season. And he looked good. The only problems that have happened to Sanders since that was he got injured a few times. That really hurt his production. A coach who's no longer employed there felt the need to throw to Boston Scott more times than anyone needed to ever see a ball thrown to Boston Scott. And then Carson Wentz completely, vomited all over himself all year in Philly. Miles Sanders was really, really good when they had Jalen Hurts in that offense. He was one of the best running backs towards the end of the season. He was extremely efficient from a real-life perspective all year last year. And the only running back of note that they went out and signed is Jordan Howard, who is nothing. They now have a really bad team. I can't imagine they're going to spend a high-value pick on another running back with this bad of a roster right now. So I think you're going to get another year of Miles Sanders as a 70% plus snap share guy with Jalen Hurts in that offense. And I think with a new coach coming to town, why not see more pass game work for Miles Sanders? They don't have anyone to throw to, right? It's Goddard, it's Rager, and I'm sure they'll add someone in the draft. But they now move back to 12. So previously, right, we were thinking they're probably going to get Jamar Chase. Now it's going to be, I don't know, maybe it's Smith, maybe it's Waddle, maybe they don't take a wide receiver in round 1, right? It's possible that all 3 of those guys are even gone by 12. So I think there's still going to be a lot of targets there. And to me, Miles Sanders has a lot of safety, at least for this year, based on that role security, and a ton of upside based off of what kind of prospect he was, what kind of athleticism he has, and what kind of pass catching ceiling we've seen, where it wouldn't surprise me at all if he has, this kind of year similar to a Dalvin Cook third year, where he came in, he got a lot of hype after his rookie season. Then he had kind of an injury-prone year 2. And year 3, everyone was way down on Dalvin Cook, even though he was still the same dude in the same great situation, that he was after the first year that got everybody so excited.
Yeah, it's weird. The narrative has shifted entirely on Miles Sanders, even with being part of like an awful situation last year. The hype was so big last year. And I remember saying last summer like, oh, this is a player that I will have 0 shares of because like I'm not going to draft him at what this what the cost is, and I'm never going to be able to trade for him because it was an absolute king's ransom prior to the season last year to trade for him. And now it's like he's totally left for dead, like an absolute afterthought in the running back world. It's crazy how fast it changes. Kind of I guess further deeper down the list. I think I'm finally on board with a bit of a Damian Harris breakout.
Oh boy, it's good you're getting this take in right before the draft.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
because you might never be able to have this take again. In 5
I
days.
reserve the right to cancel the take.
Okay.
But if they don't, and I will watch, biting my nails the same way I will for like the weird amount of Mike Davis shares that I've ended up on rosters all over the place.
How did you get all these Mike Davis shares? Please tell me you didn't trade for them since he signed in Atlanta.
No.
Okay,
it's really not all these Mike Davis shares. It's like 2 Mike Davis shares.
Okay, that's one more than I have. So.
But I don't know. I think that he was fairly impressive when he got the opportunity in New England last year. It's a weird offense in New England, and I'm still not convinced that I don't think there's any guarantee that Cam is the guy, heading into the season. But
not at all.
I'll be interested if he falls or if they trade up and end up with Fields. Crazier things have happened. I like Harris. Then if they don't, invest significant capital elsewhere at the running back position, I like him more than I like Sony Michel. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I like Damian Harris. I think as a prospect, right? I mean, all these guys like Harris, Jacobs, and Najee Harris were all, I think, pretty much the same age. Damian Harris might be slightly older, right? Yeah. They were all on the same team, in the same backfield.
Yep.
The same, Nick Saban was seeing them all every day. And I believe they were all the same age. Harris might have been slightly older. And he decided, no, Damian Harris is clearly my best running back. That happened, right? Like Josh Jacobs was relegated as a situational back. Najee Harris barely played. It was the Damian Harris show at Alabama. And he played very well. I think he's a really good running back. It's weird because my whole ethos is, fade the situation. The talent always wins out. New England sketches me the hell out because they don't do things that make sense from a running back perspective. Like even Sony Michel, who, like, I don't even know what happened to Sony Michel. I don't know if someone poised him. Like he was good at Georgia.
Yeah,
like, he
remember that?
And in
remember that like one playoff run, like the rookie year?
Yeah, right. Like he like fooled most people into thinking he was better than Nick Chubb.
Him.
They did. Someone poisoned Sony Michel because he was very good at Georgia, and especially like, do you remember that draft? Like, do you remember the 2018 draft? Everyone was looking at it and saying, "Yeah, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel. Nick Chubb probably a better pure runner, but Sony Michel is an incredible pass catcher."
Yeah.
What happened?
I don't know.
What happened to Sony Michel? The all-purpose.
He lost his mojo.
He was, I'm at a loss for words because I definitively saw him catch passes very well at Georgia. Like,
it happened. It did happen.
I know it happened. I'm pretty sure it was him. I don't think it was DeAndre Swift. So, I don't know. Damian Harris, I think, also could contribute in all phases, but I have zero faith that they will let him. I think that they will let him be, especially after they re-sign James White. I assume that they'll probably use Damian Harris even in our best case scenario, right, where he makes Sony Michel entirely irrelevant. We'll probably see 14 carries for 70 yards and then no receptions and a touchdown that's been vultured by Cam Newton. That's my fear with Damian Harris. Yeah. And then at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, now we're going into third year and, is he that talented that you think he's going to overcome this as like a 25-year-old eventually? I don't know. I still think he's a solid buy because you can get him for like a third-round pick. I think I bought him for the 305. And just from a pure talent perspective, he's a way better running back than any running back you're drafting in the third round. Like I think he's, as a prospect, I think he's the fourth best running back in this class. I think he's a better prospect than Sermon and Kylan Hill and Chuba and all these guys, to me at least, because I think he can be a complete back in this league.
Yeah, and exactly what you just said is how I've ended up with wherever I have him. It's because it's like, oh, it costs you something like the 305, or sometimes even later, like you are trading for him for pennies, like it's costing you nothing. And I agree, in the third round or potentially even later, or even realistically at the early third round, end of the second round, sometimes you're just shooting a shot on running backs.
What, you better have JV and Hawkins? Get out of here.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that this year it's like, okay, you're shooting your shot, but you don't even have the running back to shoot your shot on that has the athletic traits, right? Like,
no,
you're shooting your shot on a guy who's like, well, hopefully someday the guy in front of him gets hurt and he gets the lead job.
Right. It's like, well, if Jared Patterson, grows 20 pounds and then runs, it's like, no, I don't know.
It's a weird situation. It really is. But aside from Sanders, who's a guy that, whether it's a rookie or a guy who's been in the league, that you think you're higher on than whether it's the consensus or just most other people that you see out there?
Yeah, so Sanders is a big one. And then probably, like, the way I approach running back in startups is I draft one in round one almost always, unless I have like one of the top 3 picks. And then I'm taking a quarterback. This is super flex. And then I'm almost always drafting running back in round 2, and I'm often drafting running back in round 3. So I almost always have at least two after the first few rounds. Then I pretty much ignore running back for a long time, right? So we're going to wade our way through on a running back journey. It's like we start off, all right, I'm going to draft Taylor, I'm going to draft Akers, and then I'm going to ignore it, and I'm going to let, maybe I'll mix in a Sanders, but we're going to let all the Ronald Joneses, the Kareem Hunts, the Myles Gaskins, they get to go elsewhere. We bypass them. We draft wide receivers. And then when I start thinking about running backs again is when I see Tony Pollard, who's the guy that I have very, very highly. I'm pulling up my ranks right now. I think I have him irresponsibly high. He is he's actually my running back 30. Oh, that was it. He's my running back 30 in Dynasty. I believe in Pollard's talent to a large degree. He has the requisite size. He's flashed when he's gotten opportunities. He's been a more efficient running back than Ezekiel Elliott. And to me, there's 2 paths to value. Well, 3 paths to value for me with Pollard, right? So path number 1 is Zeke gets hurt, and now Tony Pollard is the lead back in probably the best offense in the NFL. In which case, like, if Zeke has a preseason ACL tear, where are you taking Tony Pollard in redraft? And is it like in the top 5?
It's really close.
Like he's like we're really gonna have a conversation about, is Tony Pollard a first rounder in redraft if Zeke was to go down in preseason?
Oh, right? I think if Zeke goes down in preseason, Tony Pollard is almost unquestionably a first rounder.
Exactly.
I think the thing is it like in the middle of the first round, or is it near the turn in redraft? Right. But I think unquestionably it's first round draft capital.
Right. So massive like contingent upside. And then, okay, what if, maybe Zeke doesn't go down for the season or whatever, but even if he just misses a couple games, which he's probably going to, because most running backs are probably going to miss a couple games, then you're going to get an RB1 for however many games he misses. Let's say it's 2. You're going to get an RB1 for 2 games. That has value in and of itself. And then also, he's probably going to look great because he always looks great because he is freaking great. So then you're going to start a narrative, where coming into the season after, it's like, now it's going to be Zeke's age 27 season. They can cut him after that year. Tony Pollard looked really fantastic for a couple of games. Everyone's going to be wanting to stash Tony Pollard at that point, and you're going to get a little value bump. And then the last thing is, right, let's just say Zeke is not that great anymore, because he wasn't that great anymore last year per any sort of advanced stats. And maybe that was because the rest of the offense fell off. Maybe that was because of COVID, and maybe he rebounds and he's the same old Zeke this year. That's totally plausible. But it shouldn't be like that far out of the realm of possibilities that a 26-year-old running back who's been heavily used all the way back to being a 19-year-old is starting to decline. And if he is, why wouldn't we see, a Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt style split? Because in this type of offense, if Tony Pollard just gets 10 to 12 touches a game weekly, that's like going to provide fantasy value. He's going to have a lot of touchdown upside because Dallas is going to score a ton, and he's a pass game weapon. So his touches are going to be valuable, and he could be a guy like a Naheem Hines or a Kareem Hunt last year, where even when they weren't the starting running back, you could start them every week as an RB2 or a flex, and they would give you, serious upside week to week. So Pollard is a guy that I'm all about because he doesn't go that much higher. He goes in a similar range to, these sort of questionable guys like, Gaskin or Mike Davis or Leonard Fournette, or these guys that aren't actually very good at all, but we're only drafting them because they might be starters. And then if they are starters, then they get to retain their value. And if they aren't, then we never, ever hear about them again. And he's not going that much higher than a guy like an Alexander Madison or a Darrell Henderson, who I think Pollard is better than those guys.
Agreed.
And right, like if Dalvin Cook goes down, we've seen Madison. Sometimes it's good when he plays the Lions, and then otherwise he's not actually that good.
Yep.
But he's like, to me, he's like an RB2, right? Pollard can contribute in all phases of the game, and he's very good. So I'm all about stacking Tony Pollard on my bench, because to me, you can just take Pollard. Maybe he ends up being able to start for you. Maybe you never think about him again, and then all of a sudden, if Zeke goes down, it's like Christmas morning for your Pollard shares.
I love that, because I don't want to say I'm like I don't want to say I'm all the way out on Zeke, but I'm kind of all the way out on Zeke.
Good, because I'm so out on Zeke. People hate me for that.
No, it's weird to me that the like prevailing thought is that he'll just be what he was, 2, 3, 4 years ago again this year, because I don't see it. And I know that we're, still figuring out, or everybody's kind of navigating this COVID world where, who knows how long this stuff lasts, or what the real recovery time is for, a high level athlete like that.
Right.
But I think the much more likely scenario in the range of outcomes is we've seen the best of Zeke, and like that changing of the guard is coming sooner than later. Right. So where do you have Zeke ranked?
In dynasty rankings?
Yeah.
Oh man, this is going to be,
trigger the internet. I want chaos.
Yeah, so I have Ezekiel Elliott at RB19.
Oh, I love it. It's spicy.
Because to me, this is my biggest issue with Zeke. So from like a value perspective, I see zero room to grow. Think about Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry just had one of the best running back seasons we have literally ever seen, right? Mm-hmm. Probably one of the 10 best running back seasons of all time in his age 26 year. And his dynasty value was like this. Like it either went down a little bit, maybe up like a tiny bit. It pretty much just stayed the same. And he ran for 2,000 yards. So Zeke now going into his same age season, a year later in his career, because him and Henry were drafted the same year. If he runs for 2,000 yards, we can reasonably expect his dynasty value to remain the exact same. And if he doesn't run for 2,000 yards, which seems more likely, then we can expect his dynasty value to decline.
To plummet.
So to me, like when people talk about him as a buy low, I don't really understand it, because to me, the purpose of a buy low is you buy low and then you sell high. To get Zeke right now, it's you're buying low, and basically, I guess the theory is he's going to produce as an RB1, and you can pay high-end RB2 prices for it. Like so the idea is you buy for a little bit lower, and then you will perform a little bit higher. But then he's still going to go down in value because he's an old running back. So I just don't really see the calculus on it. And to me, it's just way too possible.
Yeah.
That he's just like turns into dust soon, because the COVID thing, like you mentioned, that's the variable. But when have we ever seen a running back decline and then come back? Like people have said, many people say, oh, the cliff is overrated. Why are you selling Cook? And why are you selling Kamara? To me, I am, because I like to be proactive. But at least we haven't seen any signs of decline from Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara, right? So to me, it's much more plausible that a guy who's playing at an elite level continues playing at an elite level than that a previously elite running back who looked not elite then just magically becomes elite again. Like, when have we seen it, right? Like what people thought was going to happen with Le'Veon Bell, it didn't happen. People thought it was going to happen with David Johnson, didn't happen. It's not going to happen with Melvin Gordon. Like once these guys start to go down, right? And some people last longer, right? Like maybe some guys are LaShawn McCoy and they don't become bad until they're 30. But either way, once you start looking not that good, you're just not that good. So I think that we're probably seeing a decline with Zeke, and I just don't want to be the person who rosters it.
Yeah, I don't want to be left holding the bag. And truthfully, you're not really that much lower on him than I am. I don't have him ranked as, top 12 running back. Right now I have him at RB 16. So I have him a couple spots ahead of you.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get, it feels like there's no way. Like it feels like there's no way. It feels exactly like you just said, that you're going to end up stuck with shares of him, like he got stuck with shares of Le'Veon Bell if you didn't move him. Stuck with him like he got yeah, exactly. And even if you're buying, like there's I don't know. I just don't see it in the range of outcomes where it's like, okay, like you said, you're paying high RB2 prices for him right now. I don't even think you're getting the bump. Like, I don't even think that, like, I think that's best case is he produces like a high end RB2. And then what? And then you trade him for RB3 value the following season.
Right. To me, I just don't get it. Like, if you're not, like, because you're not going to be able to resell for more than he is now. That doesn't happen. It's not how running back value works, right? Like, we talked about the Henry one. And to me, if you're trying to just buy someone a little bit lower and say you're a contender, right? People say, well, if you buy Zeke if you're a contender because you just want the production. If you want discounted veteran production, like, why wouldn't you just rather have Aaron Jones?
Mm-hmm.
To me, like, right, like he's slightly older. I think he's like 6 months older, but he was just the RB5 last year and he looked phenomenal. And he just got a new contract. Like, I would feel much more comfortable if I'm solely looking for, okay, I'm looking for 2021 and maybe 2022, and then I'm just accepting that this guy will fade to dust on my bench, right?
Yeah.
I'm more comfortable doing that with Aaron Jones. Or why not just pay a little bit extra and get Derrick Henry, who just came off, who's, currently probably the best running back in the NFL. Like, at least that guy, like, yeah, I think he's a sell generally too because he's going to decline, but he hasn't declined yet. Like, if you're drafting in a best ball draft right now, I'm taking Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones before I'm taking Ezekiel Elliott for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I agree. It's you might as well trade for him. I said last year, I'll sell Derrick Henry. I did sell Derrick Henry. Plenty of Derrick Henry shares last year. Yeah. And it's like, damn it. And he ran for 2,000 yards, but it's like, well, who knew? Who knew that was going to happen? It was the right move at the time.
Right. No, you're totally right. Process always wins.
Yeah, man. The guy that I'm probably, and I'm not like super high on him, I guess per se, but I feel like higher on them most. And you had mentioned him before we went on down the Zeke track, is Kareem Hunt. And the reasons are because I feel like we've got to the point now where I don't have it in front of me. I forget what he finished as MPPR. I think it was like RB10 or RB11, something like that. He was a back end RB1.
I know he was an RB1
after the Nick Chubb injury, which really wasn't even when he was at his best, right? In those games when Chubb was out, like, he had the increased opportunity, but he wasn't that good. Yeah. But it's just such a unique situation where they use him enough that he's going to be fantasy relevant, and the price isn't astronomical. Like, it's not something that you have to go pay through the nose to get him. And he's still not old, and he's not getting run into the ground. Mm-hmm. And I have him right now. I'm trying to scroll and find his name, but I have him as I have him one spot ahead of Zeke. Actually,
so you're high on Hunt.
I have him as RB18. I'm sorry. That's right. You have him at RB19. Hold on. Yes, I have Zeke at 16. I have Kareem Hunt at 19. My mistake.
Okay, all right.
So I'm 3 spots behind Zeke.
Okay, that's higher than me. I have him RB25, which is probably more closely in line with consensus. But I don't hate it.
Yeah, that's I don't know. It's just a team that they're gonna run the ball enough, and they do this weird thing where they're gonna run the ball enough, and they seem content sometimes to let Nick Chubb just demolish defenses for 3 quarters, and then in the 4th quarter, it's like, hey, Kareem Hunt's still fresh. Remember him? And they just let him close out games for whatever reason.
It's really annoying because I am such a Nick Chubb guy. Like, Nick Chubb is well, I mean, Jonathan Taylor is now my favorite running back in the NFL because he plays for the Colts. But if he didn't play for the Colts, my favorite running back in the NFL is Nick Chubb, and I roster a lot of him. He's like the one running back that's 25 or older that I'm willing to just pay for at market value because I don't care, because I think he's incredible.
Yeah, he's great.
And so maybe that's why I'm lowering Kareem Hunt, because I absolutely hate him. I hate that guy. I hate him so much because I just want Chubb to get every possible touch. And then Kareem Hunt only takes the most valuable touches.
Oh, yeah. It's weird.
Right? It's so irritating because Nick Chubb gets all of these carries between the 20s that you don't care about. And then Kareem Hunt gets exclusively end-of-game rushes when you know they're going to run, passing work, and goal line work. That's the only time you see Kareem Hunt. And then the 2-minute drill. So it's like, oh, do you want some high-value fantasy points? Kareem Hunt. Oh, would you like to plod from the 40-yard line to the 55? All right, Nick Chubb, we'll let you do that at 6 yards to carry.
Yeah.
Drives me nuts, but I agree. I think Kareem Hunt's probably a value.
It's weird because it felt like such a shock last year. It was last year, right? When Kareem Hunt signed the extension in Cleveland. I was like, oh,
yeah,
there's no way.
Really,
like I
really
came
bummed
like,
me
out
out.
of yeah, because I was like prior to it happening, I was trying to trade for Kareem Hunt everywhere because I was like, oh, Kareem Hunt is definitely getting like a legit lead back job again.
Oh, I agree with you. I was all on Kareem Hunt last year.
But, you know, such is life, I guess. At least it's a team that runs the ball enough that it's like, all right, these two guys could both, I guess, sort of coexist.
Well, here's a crazy thought. This is Chubb's contract year.
Yeah.
Like last year, every running back going into year 4, either, well, I guess none of them actually held out, but all of them had like a holdout threat, right? So what if we get like a Nick Chubb threatens a holdout situation and then Kareem Hunt's ADP like skyrockets to the moon? Then that's an easy profit move, right?
Yep, sell him.
Or what if he, actually holds out? Doesn't seem plausible, but it's possible. Or what if he just doesn't re-sign in Cleveland? And then it's the opposite of what everyone thought. And Nick Chubb goes somewhere else, but they have Kareem Hunt under contract, and then Kareem Hunt gets to be the lead back in Cleveland next year.
Crazier things have happened. It's crazier things have for sure happened. Well, the flip side is somebody you're lower on than most. It's always fun to be higher than, have your guy and be higher on than most. But who's somebody you're down on?
Okay, so I'm like real down on Josh Jacobs, but I won't even talk about him because everyone's down on Josh Jacobs now. I'd like it noted I was down on Josh Jacobs before it was cool. Back when they had an offensive line, I still didn't like Josh Jacobs. I don't like Josh Jacobs any less. It's virtually impossible. I'll quickly mention that Josh Jacobs is my RB23. So that's how low I am on Josh Jacobs. I don't care about him. But I'll talk about another guy that I'm lower on than consensus. Let me just scroll down here for a sec and see where it is exactly that I have this individual. It would be Myles Gaskin, who people are talking themselves into once again because Miami didn't sign a free agent. And I have Myles Gaskin. I scrolled down. I think he's RB 48 right now. And I just last year was such a bizarre year where they had no one else on the roster. And so he got this really good role. Maybe they don't draft a running back, but I'll tell you when I'm certainly going to be lower on consensus than Myles Gaskin. And if they don't draft a running back or if they get some mediocre back, I think he's worth not a lot. I would easily trade him for a high-end second if someone thinks that they're winning the lottery and they're going to play before the draft. But if they draft any of these guys, like a Chuba or a Kylan Hill or a Jamar Jefferson, any of those guys, plenty of people are going to talk themselves into Myles Gaskin at that point. Don't count me among them. He's not even 200 pounds. He's not particularly fast. He's an okay pass catcher. Last year, he was somewhat successful. You know who else was successful in that offense? Salvon Ahmed. Are you going to tell me Salvon Ahmed is also good? No, neither of them are good. They just had a very friendly scheme that happened to be very suitable for running back talent. If they go and get Travis Etienne or Najee Harris, those guys are going to blow Myles Gaskin so far out of the water, you don't even know what you're looking at. And there's no, right, we're talking about these other 2021 running backs. People are like, oh, well, they aren't any special prospect. They aren't as good as Myles Gaskin. Who the frick is Myles Gaskin? You're telling me that Chuba Hubbard can't beat out Myles Gaskin? Yeah, he can. No one even knew Myles Gaskin was until the preseason. There's all of a sudden there's these people like, I've always thought Myles Gaskin was pretty good. No, you didn't.
Yeah.
Not a single person last preseason was out here saying that Myles Gaskin
there was not a peep about him.
So get out of here. I just, to me, he's obviously dead if they draft one of those top 3. But the reason why I'll say him is I just think that I actually think that they won't draft one of those top 3. And I can already see it now that people are going to talk themselves into him as a low-end RB2 in Dynasty if they only draft one of those RB4 to 10 types.
Yeah.
And to that I say they are already still better than Myles Gaskin. So they're just going to all be the same status, which is no status and no investment. So I think he could easily be yeeted out of existence. What do you think of Gaskin?
He last year was the perfect storm of kind of like we said about James Robinson having all the pass catching opportunity. Myles Gaskin, when he was out there, he was just getting all of the opportunity. Like they just didn't have like a better option. I'm not far off. I have him as RB 39, but if we get to that point where they don't spend like significant draft capital on one of the top 3 guys, which I agree, I don't think they will either. But after the draft, if that doesn't happen, I will happily sell him. I'll sell him now. Like you said, I'd sell him for a mid-second round rookie pick now if I could. But
absolutely.
But after the draft, if the hype train starts rolling and people are like, well, Myles Gaskin's a thing, I'm cashing in anywhere that I have him, because I only have like 2 shares of him.
I have 0, so it's just gonna make me mad. Maybe that's why I hate him so much. So I'm just so mad that I missed out, because I'm a Breida guy, so I had a lot of Breida last year.
I hyped Breida up. I like Breida too. So, and I remember saying last summer, I was like, oh, Breida's the guy in this backfield. Like he's gonna pop in this backfield. And
you know what else you were saying? You were saying I think Matt Breida can beat out Jordan Howard. You know what you weren't saying? Myles Gaskin, because he didn't even exist.
So true. The guy that I'm probably lower on than most, I don't want to even say probably lower on than most. I know I'm lower on than most, because I feel like every time I bring it up, people are like, you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. Is Austin Eckler. And
yes, I'm an Eckler hater.
Yeah. Oh, this is perfect. I'm always
in fights with people about Eckler. I've like gotten Twitter so mad about, because everyone on Twitter is always like, everyone's down on Austin Eckler. I'm like, no, they aren't.
Yeah.
You all like him.
Yeah, they all like him. I feel like I constantly see people say he's like RB12, RB13. I'm like, that is gross. That is so gross. It's so weird, the affinity that the internet shows for a running back who has he has one season where he's had over 404 receiving yards. The year with Phil Rivers where he was addicted to throwing the ball to the running back. Like, okay, great. He had 993 yards receiving.
Yeah, but which was the performance so good that they decided to let him walk. Yeah. Because that was clearly how they wanted their offense to run.
And then I don't know. I can't rank a running back. I get like pass catching upside. I get it. But he's never had 600 yards rushing in a season. And he'll be 26. And I see the Chargers. I don't see it. I see Herbert pushing the ball down the field. I see, it being a Keenan Allen offense and a high-flying passing offense more than anything. But I'm so out on Austin Eckler. He just isn't the guy that I want to be rostering, because I feel like anybody who has like the visions of him being a back-end RB1 or even like a super high-end RB2, I don't think it's happening. I don't see it.
No, I totally agree with you. They've been my stealth team all season to draft a running back because last year,
that's a great point.
Last year, it's the same thing I said about Sanders, where like last year, everyone had a picture in their mind about Miles Sanders, and then it didn't really come true. But there's also no reason why the picture changed.
Yeah.
And to me, that's how I feel about Eckler, but in the opposite sense, right? Similar to Sanders, Eckler also was fine when he got on the field, and he also missed a ton of time injured. But somehow Eckler has like risen in people's minds, but Sanders has gone down, even though Eckler is older and even though he wasn't as efficient as Sanders. And then last year, everyone was like, okay, the Chargers, they're going to probably draft a running back because they need a heavy hitting complement to Eckler. And then 2 weeks in, do you remember when Josh Kelly was an RB1 for like, about a 30-second span, right? Because everyone at the time thought Austin Eckler isn't a 3-down back, so we need a 2-down grinder. I guess that's Josh Kelly. Well, it turns out Josh Kelly is terrible. And then he got usurped by Kalen Ballage, so that's pretty embarrassing.
Yeah.
And then Ballage, shocker, also was not the answer because he's Kalen Ballage. So, but now, because they tried to get an early down running back twice and failed while Eckler was injured, now he's immune from competition. He earned his job by being hurt and then coming back and not being particularly efficient. So last year he was going to get replaced. Then they tried to replace him. The replacements didn't work. They still didn't use, they still used Ballage over him at the goal line.
Yeah.
Kalen Ballage.
Gross.
Kalen Ballage. Right? Troy Maine Pope was a person they gave the ball to. Yeah. That's not like a person that lives in the Vatican. That's a running back for the Chargers that they decided to give the ball to instead of Austin Eckler at times.
I remember the 3 days of like Troy Main Pope hype on Twitter, where it was like Pope is a buy.
He's a Pope hype sleeper.
Yeah. I like that.
No, I'm with you with Eckler. Like, it's ridiculous. He's a good player, but he is post-age apex.
He's fine. He's
post-age apex. He's a really good pass catching back. He has never once shown the ability to be a particularly good between the tackles runner. And he's like 199 pounds. And now people are talking him up as an RB1. Why? Like, he lost the coach that had funneled targets to him bizarrely. Like, last year, their offense got worse because they threw to him more, right? Like, their offense was good when he was out because they just let Herbert run the offense.
Yep.
Then Eckler came in, and they're like, remember, Justin, when you were throwing deep and completing all those touchdowns? We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to dump it off 5 yards every play to Austin Eckler. And then their offense got bad. Shocker. And now they went out and hired a new coach because that scheme wasn't working after they got rid of the quarterback who throwing to him too much wasn't working. But now he will be unleashed as a true workhorse running back. It makes no sense to me. Like, they're going to draft someone because Josh Kelly is literally the worst.
Yeah.
Like, not figuratively, like actually literally, because there's a chart out there that Ben Baldwin made that shows, like, it puts people in quadrants, right? It's like good running back or good rushing, bad blocking, or good rushing, good blocking, whatever. It has all those. And everyone's, in a particular placement on that chart, and everyone has their place. And then Josh Kelly has his own place. It's like,
off the screen.
It's like J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb, and then all these other running backs, and then Josh Kelly. Like, that's where he is. So he's going to get replaced. And then someone else is going to come in, and then that person is going to be the guy that you're like, hey, they're at the goal line. Why isn't Austin Eckler on the field? It's because he was never going to be on the field because he isn't that guy. So I don't know why Nyheim Hines would be drafted as an RB12. So I certainly don't understand why Austin Eckler is being drafted as the RB12. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, agreed. I knew you got it. I knew we were on the same page.
Oh. I'm trying to look up a tweet that I had because there was a stat, so I'm going to screw it up. But because I couldn't find it on the advanced search. But he had like 10 he had 10 receiving touchdowns that majestic 2019 year.
Yeah.
So if you can think of all of the best pass catching running backs from the last decade, from LaShawn McCoy, James White, Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, name them. Whoever you can possibly think of. I went through basically everyone that had been the most productive pass catching backs this decade. None of them had more than 8 touchdowns in a year receiving. So Austin Eckler already was on a completely different level than them. And none of them, I think, had ever had more than 6 twice. So the odds that he ever repeats that are absolutely astronomical.
Yeah.
And he has, I believe is 4 career rushing touchdowns. I think it's like 4 or 5, like in his career rushing. It's a very low number. He basically doesn't score rushing touchdowns. I might have the number wrong, but whatever it is.
It's 9, but it's still low.
Okay, so then maybe it was 4 over the last 2 years or 5, something. But
yeah, he had 3 in 2019 and then 1 last year.
Okay, so that's what I was thinking. So it's 4 over the last 2 years. So there's no reason to expect that he's going to score more than 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns this year. Is he going to get a ton of passing touchdowns? Is he going to rush for a lot of yards? Like, we have no basis for this. It's bizarre to me. It
really is. Well, we'll wrap it up real quick here. Draft's coming up. We got to get a prediction.
Oh, yeah.
Running backs going round 1. You think Najee or Etienne sneak in, or they both go round 2?
Yeah, I think definitely one goes in round 1. I think it's been a really annoying argument on Twitter where people say, well, is Jonathan Taylor really that good? Because, he didn't go in round 1, and Najee Harris is going to go in round 1. No, it's because last year there were so many good running backs. You could get a good running back in round 2. This year there's only 3. So I think both Najee Harris and Travis Etienne go in round 1 because there's a lot of running back needy teams. And if you miss out on those 3, then Mike Davis is your RB1.
Solid point. Well, before we let you go, Jacob, make sure to, if anybody's not following your work or doesn't know where to check it out already, please plug all that so that they can follow you on Twitter and check out all the good work that you're putting out there. Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter, FF_RTDB. You can find some of my work up on Join Our Circle Fantasy Intervention. And then I have one article up right now on Player Profiler, but that's about to be multiplied. Working on a new piece on why Baltimore is not that bad of a landing spot for a wide receiver. I know that's been a take that I've been on for the last bit that's got people riled up. So we're going to do a deeper dive into that.
And you can find me on the Full Tilt Podcast. We're doing a big breakdown of all things draft on Thursday. We're going to have a watch party. We're going to have a bunch of guests. It's going to be fun. I'm going to have to drink a six-pack of Molson live on air, thanks to a slightly ill-advised Twitter competition that I ran. So you can check me out on that on Thursday. And then tomorrow night, you can check out my usual show on Tuesdays with Shane Manila and Chase Vernon.
Awesome, man. And yeah, I look forward to joining you guys Thursday night. I'll pop in towards the end.
Absolutely.
Of the draft. We'll have some fun, but I appreciate you taking the time to come on, and we'll definitely do it again, man.
For sure. My pleasure. Thanks a ton for having me on, Anthony.
Yeah, for sure. Have a good night.
Absolutely.